Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to today's storytelling module, which is focused on labels. And I got to say that I think this is the most beautiful room I have sat in since breakfast. I am in the Mama Shelter Hotel, which I did think was going to be an old people's home, but this is beautiful. My name is Wyndham Wallace, and to give you a little background as to why I'm here, I'm a freelance writer who once used to make his living working for record labels, which means I do at least have a very small idea as to why I've been invited to host today's session. I started out as an independent publicist back in the mid-1990s, working for a number of labels, including Matador, Blast First, and Ouija, which meant that I was tasked with boosting the profiles of acts like John Spencer Blues Explosion, Guided by Voices, Corner Shop, and Heat Miser. I didn't do such a good job of the latter, you'll probably have noticed, but their singer, Elliott Smith, went on to bigger and better things for a while. I then took over running German label City Slang's UK office, a job which lasted in various different guises for 8 years before I myself moved to Berlin. And after a less than successful attempt to set up an indie imprint on behalf of K7 Records, I focused for a little while on management, meaning that I got to see things from the other side of the fence, whether working with the Nashville singer Courtney Tidwell, whose success was sadly limited, or with Lee Hazelwood, the man behind These Boots Were Made for Walking, some of whose work I oversaw for the last 8 years of his fairly successful life. I even wrote the text for his last song, which means that, in a way, I can call myself an artist. Since then, I've worked mainly as a writer in various capacities for Uncut, Classic Pop, The Guardian, Sunday Times, and my favourite outlet, The Quietus, as well as preparing press biogs for record labels, such as Indeed Kenny's. And I hope that qualifies me for the job that now lies ahead. An hour and a half of storytelling by the men behind 3 of the most important labels of recent times, I believe. In alphabetical order, DFA, Good Life, and PS Recordings, forgive me. But before I go on to introduce the participants, I've been asked to begin this talk with a few more scene-setting words of my own. And that means, as anyone who knows me can tell you, it's time for a brief burst of nostalgia. By the time I had become what one might call a real music fan, I'd started to notice the strange names on the backs of the records that I bought. This began with CBS, which I noticed on Simon and Garfunkel's Sounds of Silence, which, age 7, I inherited as an 8-track cartridge from my uncle. Soon there was ZDT, whose weird rambling text dominated the sleeves of acts like Frankie Goes to Hollywood and Propaganda. Then there was Rough Trade, who to me, by the age of 20, were, as I put it in a book which I have just finished writing, were a company that stands for so much of the independent label aesthetic I've come to worship that I feel unworthy even to be in the same street as them. Labels like these, as well as others with whom I became increasingly familiar, like Blast First, Factory, Mute, 4AD, Creation, Warp, even City Slang itself, were all identifiers of quality. I might not have liked everything they released, but I knew from experience that I was more likely to enjoy their records than any being released by larger corporations. The records these indie companies released were always worth the risk. It's hard to say why. There were plenty of acts that I enjoyed on major labels, Pet Shop Boys, Prince, Tears for Fears, but there was something about the independent label aesthetic that meant I felt I could trust them. There was a romance surrounding these companies. I'm not here to blast major labels, of course. They too play a valuable role in this industry and have given us far more of value than perhaps many of us care to admit. But there was something anonymous about them. Whereas I felt I could sit down with people like Daniel Miller from Mute, Ivo Watts Russell of 4AD, and Paul Smith of Blast First Records, and talk about music the way I love to with my friends. Their labels had a personality, passion, and identity that appealed to me, and with which I wished to be associated. And yet I couldn't imagine who was behind a major label. I began to understand why people referred to them as suits. But even with major labels, there was an associated glamour and mystery and magic to what they did. As a teenager, I barely even dreamed of working for a record label of any kind. Only a very few select and no doubt incredibly cool people, much like yourselves, were worthy of that privilege. These people got to hang out with musicians, and in many ways they got to choose the very music that we hear. So who were these people who ran record labels? How did they get there? What kind of people were they? What inspired them? Were they just music fans who couldn't help themselves and had to beg, borrow and steal, whatever it took, to ensure that the music that they discovered found a greater audience? That is certainly the way that the history books like to see it. Alan McGee putting together 7-inch singles in his Glasgow bedsit flat, Daniel Miller releasing his own act, The Normal, on 7-inch, and finding himself unable to resist the lure of releasing music by others. But there has to be another side to the story. If all it takes to be a successful record label owner is having a passion for music, then I can assure you that the two record labels I set up, Easy Tiger and Ever Records, wouldn't leave you scratching your heads asking who the hell they were. No, there must be another quality or other qualities required to make a label work, whether they be a tiny indie or a giant major. For starters, you need to know the business. It's not enough just to find a band. You need to fund them, market them, get their records in the shops, and maintain a campaign profile. You need to know when the best time to tour and release a record is, how to control an act's profile, and sometimes, hardest of all, you need to get on with them. Musicians can be a complex breed, after all. Most importantly, however, you need to make sure the balance sheet stays firmly enough in the black to be able to continue. And as everyone knows, creative types are rarely accountant types. Having all of these skills must therefore be fairly rare. Today I get to ask questions like these to 4 people behind 3 of the most significant labels around. PS Recordings, represented here today by co-founder Kenny Gates, was founded in Belgium in 1983 and first made its mark with industrial and electronic acts like the terrifying Young Gods, Front 242 and Meat Beat Manifesto. Since then, they've diversified to release acts as varied as Solwax, Mogwai and Agnes Obel, as well as partnering up with Wall of Sound and Fat Cat Records, for instance, and releasing the first Sigur Rós and Moom albums. PS Recordings is, of course, part of the larger PS group, which Kenny also co-founded and is described by the source of all knowledge, Wikipedia, as an international recording, licensing, distribution, sales, and marketing company for premium music, film, and comedy. Also present today are the hacker, known to his mother as Michel Amato, and Alex Reynaud. Together, they're the men behind Good Life Recordings and Zone. Given my penchant for quoting other sources, let me tell you that Resident Advisor defines Good Life as providing electro, retro, acid, new wave funky sounds with present-day techno production values, which is a hell of a genre. The hacker, or may I call you Michel? Thank you. Began making music in the 1980s in electro, new wave indie bands, or so I read. But he slowly moved towards rave, hardcore and techno, as well as enjoying a successful collaborative relationship with Miss Kitten. He was joined by Alex in 1998 when they set up Good Life in conjunction with fellow French electronic pioneer Oxia. And they are, as we like to say, still going strong. Finally, also with us today is Jonathan Galkin, who is the allegedly silent partner, hopefully not too silent, though I know you are very jet-lagged, the silent partner in DFA Records alongside James Murphy of LCD Sound System and, once upon a time, former Uncle member and Mowax acolyte Tim Goldsworthy. But as the Fader magazine wrote a few years back, DFA's office is really Jonathan Galkin's office. Jonathan is the man who holds it together and has done since its founding. The label has proven itself right from the start to be a hugely influential player, its releases arguably defining the sound of New York for the last decade or so, whilst reaching out across the globe and enjoying success worldwide. I am therefore undeniably rather excited to be here. And with luck over the rest of this module, we'll get to find out exactly what makes them tick and how they've made it this far. I'll be spending a quarter of an hour speaking to each of the participants here in turn before opening the floor to allow all of you, or as many as we have time for, to ask questions yourselves for the last 15 minutes or so of this session. So ladies and gentlemen, if you'll forgive the terrible line, it's time to hear some fables about the labels. If you'd welcome the participants, that would be great. So I'm going to begin by speaking to Kenny here, which is why he's holding this microphone so professionally.
1, 2, 1, 2.
If you could try an A. And what I would like to try and do is get them to tell their personal stories behind their record labels as much as the professional stories. So Kenny, can you maybe tell us a little bit about how you first fell in love with music, when the moment was you realised that music meant something to you? Was there a significant moment, a significant record, a significant concert?
You told me you were going to ask that question when we were having lunch.
Did you not prepare?
I am prepared now. So I think it might be when my big brother played Dark Side of the Moon to my father, and I got acquainted to stereo, hearing the sounds going from left to right, from right to left, and I really thought that was absolutely fantastic. Of course, he was listening to the Beatles as well, and other types of music, and I really enjoyed that moment of hearing the emotions through the loudspeakers of music. So that might be a defining moment, Dark Side of the Moon, and then, hundreds of other moments.
Was there a specific point when you felt that working in the music industry was going to be the thing that you had to do?
Well, I started it as a hobby. I was at school, and I decided with my business partner, Michel, was running a store, that we could import records into Belgium, and so that if we were not going to make any money, at least we would have free records. And that's why we started doing that. So it was kind of something which happened naturally and wasn't like a really conscious decision about being in the business. But it's true that all the labels you mentioned in your introduction, they were my mentors and my models, like the Mutes and the 4ADs and the Rough Trades and Factory Records, And when we started, one of the first record we sold more than 1,000 of was New Order Blue Monday, which is a fantastic record, of course. And of course that labels, eventually we found out that Factory Records had lost 10 pence on every 12-inch they sold. And as it was the biggest ever selling 12-inch in the history of 12 inches, that was, quite a big loss for them, but also sums up the unprofessional and spontaneous and mad 80s record indie labels ethos and mentality of that time.
Was there a specific point when you realised that this wasn't going to be just a hobby and that this was what you were going to be pursuing as a career?
Yeah, I don't like the word career, but...
Forgive me.
I don't know if there was a specific moment, but it's true that I was at university, we started importing records, and then, I was going to give it 2 years in my mind to see if I could, make it a business, turn it into a real business. And we started in the basement of my parents' house, so we had no overhead, we were just 2 or 3 of us. And eventually I gave up school and I went to my father and said, I'm giving up university. And I'll be doing this full time. So I then decided to be my career.
You mentioned that you left school, or maybe it was university, but one of the things that has always fascinated me, as I said to you over lunch, was about the music industry, is that it seems to be dominated by people who don't necessarily have training, and that to have a kind of education sometimes means that you're confined to working within certain situations, rather than working in the more punk rock, DIY, thinking outside the box style. Do you think the fact that you didn't complete your education actually helped you and stopped you from pursuing things in a more formal way and allowed you to be more imaginative?
It's a difficult question to answer. I think that I don't think education or not has anything to do with my particular case. It was just a moment in time, and I believe, we're not going to go philosophical here, in calm or whatever. It just the fact that I met that person, Michel, who's been my business partner for 30 years. That meeting, that moment of meeting him and us becoming friends and wanting to do something together was a defining moment of something. I think if I had ended my school cycle, it's not because I would have had a diploma, it would have made a difference. It's just that window of opportunity, which we didn't realize at the moment was a window of opportunity, would have gone, and it just happened, and we just followed our instinct and followed the path. We didn't know we were going, but we went somewhere, and then we went somewhere else, and then 30 years later, we're still here.
I believe it took you a couple of years before you started PS Recordings itself, is that right?
I think no, actually, because the history of the label is entrenched with one album. Michel had a label, the only and first, well, the first independent Belgian label called Sandwich Records. His choice for record labels was what it was, and he had completed an album by an electronic Belgian band called Polyphonic Size, produced by J.J. Burnell or the Stranglers. I was still a groupie at the time, and still am. But so Burnell produced the album for us, and Michel didn't have the money to actually press the records, and I had some savings. So I lent him the money to actually go and press 2,000 vinyl albums and 2,000 sleeves to be able to actually have managed to pay for the studio, but he was completely broke. So I learned about making a record with that album being made, and I learned about distribution because we actually went to the pressing plant and I saw how a vinyl was being made and went to the printer and see the covers being made. And then I just was sleeving in the car whilst he and I were going from store to store to sell records, and I was selling 25, making the money back and paying myself back, and that's how I understood just in a very short period of time, making a record, manufacturing a record, selling a record, getting the money for the record, and then I realized how risky it was and how expensive it was and how of a incredible, heavy process it might be. So, we decided to import records as well and distribute. And only when we had a bit of money made of import, we were then making a record and producing and signing a band. But it was actually, PS was a label almost before it was a distributor.
So
it's a long answer, isn't it?
No, but the long is great. Means I ask less questions. They're not here to see me. Was there a moment there, sort of around that first record, where you suddenly realised, wow, I'm actually doing this thing that I never thought I would maybe be doing, which is I'm running a record label? Did it feel like you were sort of fulfilling the dream that had started with Pink Floyd's record swinging across the speakers?
Well, yes, but then you can't. It only lasts for a moment. When you're alone and you're just looking and you watch yourself in the mirror and you go, "Oh, I'm actually doing what I love doing," and that's what is important, I think, in life in general, and what drives most of the people of PS, if not all, is just enjoying what you do and being passionate about it, and that passion is part of the company culture and goes down through people who you mentioned at lunch who work for me. So it's about really doing it for the right reasons and being passionate about what you do.
It sounds to me like a lot of record labels that you kind of almost started it by accident in a way. Did you have any kind of clear goal or clear aesthetic for the label in the same way as 4AD and Factory had a very clear identity? Was that something that you thought about?
Yes, I just wanted to do exactly the opposite. I didn't want any aesthetic because I thought I had a resistance to music snubness, being snub about music, and then I thought that I love those labels, and I couldn't do as well as they did anyway. So I thought that, you know, not having too much of an aesthetic, not focusing too much on an aesthetic was my best way of not trying to compete with them because they were too good at it.
How long did it take you before you stopped feeling like you were working hand to mouth and that every record could bust you? Did it take you a few years before you felt secure that you had a business that was going to work, or was this something that...
I still don't feel secure. Nothing has changed really in that respect.
Okay.
It's a ever-changing world, so I certainly don't feel like if I've achieved anything which I can just rest on any laurel whatsoever, because that's the best way of losing grip and doing the wrong thing.
What do you think it is about the company that's enabled it to survive for so long? I mean, you're one of the veteran labels these days, one of the veteran indie labels.
Well, you tell me. I don't know. I think it's lots of things. On the purely industrial kind of thought process and general strategy, I think what has allowed us to stay so long around is you know, the European idea, definitely, because coming out of Brussels, Belgium, you know, my father is British, so I had that, you know, I could speak English much better than anybody in Belgium or even in France at the time, in the music industry. And so that really helped, but definitely being in the smallest country almost in Europe, I wanted to turn a disadvantage into an advantage, and what people were saying about Brussels at the time is it's going to become the capital of Europe. So very early on I had that vision, and that we were going to become the crossroads of a European independent network. That was what, you know, it's always been the strategy, still is the strategy, and I think that's proven, you know, a good thing for us. And the other one is created more, you know, it's probably the company culture, which is made out of people who are not working at PS usually by chance. They are there because they believe in what they do, because there is a fil rouge of why they are there. You know, the German guy, you know, the French guy, the Belgian guy, the Dutch guy, they all have this culture in them of finding the right balance between being music people and having a business sense, and that really it's a difficult balance to have. But I want people in my company who love music, but in the 80s, as we discussed maybe over lunch, that might have been enough just to be passionate and knowing about music. But now you need people who also have a business sense, and I think, you know, the success of PS is the success of the team. And the individuals and the company culture, and that's why we're still around, because it's such great people, I think.
Just to give a sense to the people who maybe are less familiar, having started out in that basement with just the two of you, how big has the company become now?
In terms of what, staffing or?
You have offices, I think, in quite a number of countries and quite a lot of staff these days.
Yeah, so London, Brussels, Amsterdam, Hamburg, Paris, Madrid, Dublin, Los Angeles.
You've done all right.
170 people working for PS, but we were 500 at the beginning of the century, so we got carried away a bit. But then reality catches up. And in terms of billings, it depends. It goes between 70 million euros to 100. Depends if we have another album or not.
You mentioned a moment ago that back in the 80s it was enough just to be passionate to work in a record company, and that's changed a little bit. Do you find it harder the longer you do this to still be passionate about music? I mean, my own personal experience working in record labels was that the more I worked with the business side of it, the less easy it was to actually enjoy the music, because all I could see was figures and units. Has that been hard for you to maintain that passion, or do you think it's not so important once you get to a certain level and you let other people replicate the passion that you once had?
No, well, definitely I can't be passionate alone for 180 people, and the passion is there with the people. It's true that when I spend a whole afternoon and look at P&Ls and spreadsheets, and I see all the red and all the brackets or not, and I go through, you know, those hours and hours of financial spreadsheets, it's good to come out and listen to a new album. But yes, maybe I'm less like excited than I used to be, but when I hear an old J album coming out, or Valerie June, and I'm thinking we need to break this artist, it's the fire we have, and it's still there. But I don't probably go as much in record stores and buy piles of records as I used to. But definitely when there's new and exciting music around, it's the same and identical, you know, fire in all of us.
Yeah. What would you say has been the highlight of your not career with PS?
It's Today With You.
Why wouldn't it be? But aside from that,
there's been several highlights. You know, I think, okay, if you want one highlight, it's the release of the Too Many DJs album, maybe, because it was a defining moment, defining genre, both musically and on a business side, just clearing the album, and basically clearing the album, which was cleared as a DJ mix album, but actually became a new genre called mashup, where two songs are mixed up. It was really fun to, you know, clear it with people who didn't know what they were talking about, and then found out what the album was and get all the legal shit and having to deal with that, and then the album was so good that nobody dared stopping it. So and then we sold 500,000 albums. I was hoping to sell 15,000. So that was a good moment. But there's been plenty of great moments, and hopefully there'll be plenty of great moments, more great moments. With DFA, who just joined PS recently.
A fine decision. Is there anything left that you feel that you have not succeeded in achieving with this label? Are there goals left for you, or do you feel like that you can just pursue the path that you've been following now?
Yes, there's always something to do, and what I'd like to do, which we really haven't done as a record label, is sell 2 million albums of one album. I haven't done that yet. And it's great to see the success of my peers or my mentors like Martin Mills, who's got 10 years of careers more in him than I do, and who last year, the year before, even though he had so much success, he sold 25 million adult albums. So to me, that is, you know, I always look at the people who are older than I am and kind of try and borrow from the future, and it's good to know that the best is always still to come, and I believe that the best is still to come for PS, and the best is still to come for our labels and for our music in general, and it's like a carrot, you know, who's in front of you. You can never get to eat. And so I know for PS that the best is still to come, and there's a new Editors album on the 2nd of July, and I've heard that album, and I want to sell 2 million of it, and I haven't sold 2 million of one of my own productions and own albums, and when I will have sold 2 million, then, you know, I'll tell you I want to sell 5 million. So yes, I think there's always something exciting to be done.
Excellent. Well, your 15 minutes of fame are now up, and you're still hungry, which is a very good thing. Ladies and gentlemen, Kenny Gates. Time to turn to the French. Good afternoon, Michel and Alex. Thank you for joining us. And I'd like to talk to you about some similar themed things with the good life. Perhaps you could start by telling me a little bit about the background of Good Life itself. We'll rewind perhaps afterwards, but the label itself, could you maybe tell me how that started and how you two became affiliated?
Again, it's a story of friendship. We met in the mid-90s in Grenoble, where we're from, and we met in this record shop, and we wanted to. You have a microphone. And yeah, the idea was just to. We were already going out in rave parties and techno parties, and I was already making music since a few years, and it was just a simple idea to create a label to release our own music, and then to release also music from other people we like, as simple as that. And there was no plan, no big, it was just releasing the music, and I think we were a part of this emerging techno scene in the 90s where everybody was creating his label. Maybe it was too much labels now, I think. But for us it was the thing to do.
And Alex, how had you met in the originally?
Originally, we met each other with Michel, with Oxia, with Kitty. All the band are born in Grenoble, and we meet each other in a record shop. And we shared some flyers at first, and we went together in the same party as Michel, in the rave party. And as he said, it is still a friend story. And at a moment, as they start producing music, I was there, and they told me, "Hey, Alex, can you do the label? Can you do the sleeve for us? And maybe we can. There is some label in Detroit. They produce their own record.
Let's do the same."
Yeah. What can you? How can you do that? And, we check. We contact some distributor, import. We contact some people to do mastering, etc. And we contact Cyril Bonin, who is here, I think. We help us in distributing record. We were years after connected with Pias, with Kenny, and we start to produce record and to receive the tracks and go ahead. And there was no plan. We share all together the same passion for the music, and we want to produce our own music.
Had you been a big music fans, both of you, from like an early age?
Yeah, me from when I was like 12 or something like that. It was clear in my head that I wanted to do music. I didn't know how or what or when, but yeah, for me that was clear. Music was my thing, yeah, and still today.
Had you grown up listening to electronic music, or?
Yeah, but I didn't realize that it was electronic music. It was, for me, like Kraftwerk or Depeche Mode were really the band that makes me want to do music. But when I listened to that, I was like, I don't know, 14 or 15. And I didn't really realize it was electronic music. It's just like a few years later, I was like, all the bands that I like are doing electronic. And then after it was like New Order or other bands like that. And yeah, it was a big influence for me.
And you mentioned that there was that you were going to the same parties and stuff like that. You sent me kindly a hour-long documentary which I watched, and I saw some footage of some of these early parties, and there seemed to be about 50 people at these parties. These were very small, exclusive parties.
Sometimes we organize a party in an old house, warehouse, and some illegal party. And at the beginning, for example, 20 years ago, we cannot imagine to be here in this place to speak about techno music. At the beginning, we were especially in this city in Lyon, especially in Grenoble. When you said people, you are making techno, you are producing techno, you organize party. You were considered a bad boy and drugging people. It was very hard to. It was and that's why I think we create the label, we create some booking agency, and we create their own business. But for us, it wasn't a business; it was a passion and a friend relationship we had together.
I think an interesting thing is that for us from the beginning, the label and the party were linked. You know, we were releasing music that we were playing in our parties, and I think that was also an very important thing for us.
Mm-hmm. So when you finally decided that it was time to start a record label, was it purely and simply because of your music, or were there other factors involved?
I think for Good Life, if I remember well, I had a lot of tracks and I didn't know where to send those tracks. And Alex then said to me, maybe let's do our own label, because before that we already had some experiences. Myself, I had it's not really a label, I made only like 2 12-inch, so I know a little bit how it worked. But then, and also my music was changing, I was doing something different. And so I think the starting point was like, where can I release my tracks? And that's how it started. And then we had other artists joining us. Of course friends, but then other people from, like for example, Doppler Effect from Detroit did stuff for us. Like people from Germany who I used to work with on Gigolo Records. So, and it was evolving like that. But at the beginning it was just for me.
Okay. Alex, what was your role at the beginning?
My own role is only to take care about all the things the artist don't want to take care.
Yes.
Paper, contract, sleeve, etc. All the business part. But I love doing that, and I still loving that because I'm very proud when the artist on the stage with the logo, the label, they play the music we produce. And I'm enjoying about that.
And I think it's a bad thing to have a label where only artists do the artistic direction. It's a very, very bad thing. Only egos, and you need to have someone who's not doing music, who have a much more clear view, for the music and choices and things like that.
Alex, did you ever feel that you were getting the arse end of the business, that you were having to sit there doing the paperwork and balance the books, whilst Michel was busy making music and partying and doing whatever things people do at parties,
no.
whilst you had to get up early the next morning?
No. As I said, first we are friends, and there is how do you say it? We have the same passion, and we help each other. He helped me by send me every day some new tracks and tell me, listen this. And when he need something to check, contract, when we have business thing to do, we share all together, and we grow up all together. And it's the same on our new label Zone. We are doing the same thing.
But he comes to the party also.
And I still come to the party, and I help. Sometimes I'm a tour manager, and I travel a lot with them. And before the beginning of the MP3 and all the digital, I carry a lot of vinyl in the airport all around the world. And it was our job, but it's cool job. It's cool job.
But you're very much equal partners in the business, like you both own equal shares, if that's not too impolite a question.
We don't make any money, so...
No, yeah. We
split, we share the good times, basically.
Share the good life.
Yeah, we share. In fact, we really share the good life, because now we run a new label, which is real, with Gesafelstein, a new artist, and David Reynaud, who is living in Lyon, and we are all together. But they are the two others are more young. But we start like the beginning, with nothing, with only a structure, and only want to open our catalogue and open all the new style and new kind of artist. And with the label, I'm not sure if we didn't realize much money, but it's not the aim of the label. It's not the aim.
Michel, did you ever have moments where, whilst you were sitting and writing music, that you felt in a way you were being compromised by the fact that it was also a business? I know that many of your records came out on Gigolo quite early on, but did you ever feel like your music was having to be made in order to satisfy a commercial need so that you could feed yourself?
No, I never really thought my music like that. No, I never thought about things like that. I just do my music, and then we'll see what we do. And I think it's also one of the reasons why creating a label is that I could release my own music without any pressure of commercial format or whatever. So no, that was never a problem for me. No.
But you then did sign with DJ Hell's label in Munich, Gigolo Records.
That was an interesting story, and no, that was really a good time, and that was really that make the starting point of my career was really with Gigolo. He was the only one, I think, DJ Hell in Europe or in the world to believe in our music with Miskitin. We sent some demos, I remember, and everybody was like, it's okay, but no. And then DJ Hell said, okay, I want it. And we released the whole tracks. And then we went on tour 2 weeks later, and that's how it started for me and Caroline and Miskitin. So it was really an important moment for me, and it gave me also confidence in my music. He said to me, stop making this techno thing. You are not Jeff Mills, you're not from Detroit, you're a French guy from Grenoble, and do your electro thing mixed with new wave and Italo disco, that's what you're good at. And then I realized he was right. So it was, someone, I still have the t-shirt. But no, that was an interesting period, very funny.
Had you met him before you started working? He approached you?
Actually, it's Miskitin who met him first. She played to him the tracks we did, and that's how we started. But of course, I knew him because he was already touring at DJ Hell. He was a big name. He still is a big name, and he's quite a character.
He does have fabulous hair.
Yeah, especially now.
Alex, did you at any point kind of question the idea that you should sort of take away your kind of signature artist from the label that you were doing together? Did you feel that you were missing an opportunity, or did you see this as a chance to actually learn new things and improve what you guys were doing?
No, the signature of the label still starts in the party. In party when we meet, because even if we are now 40 with Michel, I know you are 32. 32. We still going to the party. We love smoking cigarettes in the backstage and discuss with a lot of artists, promoters, and share and talk about music all the night and listen artists, and that in this place we meet artists, and we met artists, and it is at this moment there is a friend relationship with artists. And it's really important. There is a human relation with the artist. We don't want now to sign artists. We don't know where he is, what he's doing, etc., etc. We need especially good music, but a good relationship with him. So that's why we will produce all the artists and newcomer this several months. You want I say you some artists?
You can do whatever you like. So
no,
you have the stage, please.
Yeah, I have the stage. Maybe we will sign normally Doppler effects.
Again,
but it's hard to sign him. We will sign Crash Course in Science. Yeah, we will sign some tracks of Michel, and we will sign a French guy, which is Maelstrom, at the end of May.
Okay, good luck with that. How do you think that you've both changed? I mean, I'll start with you, Michel. How do you think you've changed as a person since you started this record label?
Well,
it's a big question.
I don't know. In terms like,
I mean, has it affected the manner in which you that you approach the business? Like since you first started, obviously out of enthusiasm, do you now see it in a very different way?
No, I think I'm still this. I didn't change too much for that. I still think in a non-business way. Just I'm still, and I think the main thing when you do this, it's to be curious, to still have the will to discover new people and listen to new music. And I'm still excited when we receive demo, you know, like from a guy I don't know. I'm like, maybe this will be the next big thing. And I think the day you lose this interest, the day you lose this curiosity, you can't stop. You know, it means that you're bored or just do something else. But I still have this, and I still have this interest for, of course, for music, buying records, listening records. and all these things. I spent hours on Beatport. You know, who does that? You know, so I'm still interested in music, and I think that's the main thing. So no, I didn't really. I don't think that I changed. I changed maybe as an artist myself with my own music and everything, but for the way I see the music and the label, no, not really.
Alex, do you want to?
Maybe I changed because I'm connected on another business with the music business. I'm connecting on the digital business. I work for advertising company online, but it changed me the vision how to promote artists, how to help them to grow. But I'm still curious, and I'm still excited when we produce a track, when we start the promotion, and when several months after the issue we check the review in magazine, and we check all the people who are talking about the artist. There is the crew behind the stage. We upload the artist, etc. That is cool, and in this case, I'm still young, and I want to continue to do that, and that's why, as Michel said, the business part is still there, but it's not our aim.
Obviously, many record labels over the last decade or so have found it increasingly difficult to survive with the piracy revolution. Have there been points over the last 10 years where either of you have thought, you know what, we can't compete. There's no point us continuing to do this anymore. We give up.
No, not. I don't know. Yeah, no. Sometimes, yeah, we were. But it was not because of that. It was maybe because we felt we were nobody understand our music, and why this record does. We were expecting maybe bigger sales or things like that. But now about piracy and all those things, you just have to deal with that. There's no other choice, you know. So and that's why also for us now releasing music is our main thing. But in terms of making money, we do a label night. That's how we make money, much more than the sales. So anyway, there's nothing you can do against people who download illegally your music, so you just have to get along with it and continue. Yeah.
Alex, did you ever?
Yeah, now we organize a party in order to make money, to help to promote our issue, to produce the record, and we changed a little bit our economic model, and because we need to if when I remember several years ago we were able to send 10,000 of EP. After I remember in 2005, yeah, it was like 1,000 vinyl.
So it's like 300.
Now it's at 300, 500. If you produce a vinyl, now it's 500. Even if there is 1 million view on YouTube, if there is 1 million fan on Facebook, the vinyl is.
We don't do vinyl anymore so far. Right now, with the new label we have, we only do digital. We will see maybe next year a CD or a compilation or an object. You know, do something nice, but we don't do vinyl anymore. To sell like 200 copies or 300, it's not really worth it, I think.
And how many of you are actually now working with the label? Is it just the three of you still, or do you have other people working with you?
We have two.
Just two.
Yeah, we have two other people who are working with us. There is, as I said before, they have 25, 26 years old. Yeah.
Yeah, they are younger than us, like two other people. So as we said, there is David who work with Alex on the business side of things, and then there is Mike, known as Gesafferstein, who work, and together we do the artistic choice. We select the music and everything. So that's how we run the label.
Do you have ambitions to grow the label, or is it essentially that you're comfortable with the way things are now?
Oh, we want to. No, we want to be bigger if possible. Yeah.
Yeah, we want to be bigger, and that's why we are connected with some management agency. We are able to organize tour. We are able to organize promotion. And we think we need to be to have the lead on the artistic direction, the music first, but even the artwork. We are very we check very how do you say in English? We are very careful of the artwork and the image we can make with each issue. And after we organize with booking agency and with promotion agency, and that's why we want to grow up and to help artists to grow.
When you were back at the age of 16, 17 and hanging out in that record shop in Grenoble, passionate about music and talking about the latest Depeche Mode B-sides, how do you think you would have felt if you'd known that, 20, 25 years later, you'd be making a living out of releasing electronic music and organising parties that didn't end until lunchtime?
Yeah.
2 days later.
Oh, yeah, that was a dream, actually, for me, for sure. But it seems impossible at that time for me. But then techno changed everything. But when I really wanted to make music when I was like 16 or 17, I was really into this new wave thing, like as I said, Depeche Mode, blah blah blah. But I was like, I can't do it. I'm French, I will never be taken seriously with this kind of music. But then techno came and it changed everything. You could be French and be cool, it was okay, because there was no words on the music. It was just musical. So that changed a lot of things. But yeah, for me it was a dream to live with my music, and that's what I really wanted to do, nothing else.
Alex, for you, could you ever have imagined that back then?
No. I imagine sometime that I would be able to create something with friends, with a band. But no, 20 years ago, I imagine I'm 40 with babies, a house, a dog, and not doing like yesterday afternoon, dancing, partying with Laurent Garnier and of the band at the Nisona.
Alex, I'm going to ask this question to you first, actually, if I may. How significant do you think it has been that you have had a, if I may be so bold, charismatic, successful musician at the front of the label? Has that? There are many labels which are run by people, whether it be Alan McGee of Creation, me being more of an indie kid. Those are the people that I think of, these record label bosses that people can identify with and people know their names and stuff. Do you think that it has been very significant that Michel has had his own music out there and he's had a visible profile to people, or do you think this would have happened anyway?
No, I think it's really important that there is some, there is an artist who are the flag of the label, and they are able. It's even when I spoke, I said before that we love smoking cigarette in backstage and chatting about music. But it's important that the artist of the label promote the label and help some young artists to grow up, and that's why the artistic direction is organized by Michel and Mike Gesafelstein, and I made the decision first. The last word and the decision it is for Mike and Michel.
And the last question I'd like to ask you both is there a moment that you look back on over the last, whatever it be, 20 years or so, is there a moment that you look back on that makes you smile more than any in association? A moment where you feel like this was where it really kicked off?
It's hard to pick one moment. There was like a lot. But the first thing that comes to me is this residency we had in this huge club in Barcelona, Razzmatazz. We had a Good Life residency for nearly 10 years. And every year during Sonar Festival, it was totally crazy, And at the end, we were like bringing so many friends with us that they hire a bus just for us, like a bus where you can put like 50 people in it. And it was, I think at that moment it was like 8 in the morning after the party. Like Vitalik was here, I remember. And we saw that, I saw this bus, I was like, this is cool. We are like the French football team, you know, we had our own bus, you know. So I think that was funny. But there was a lot of moments like that, especially all the residency we have in some clubs and the tour we did. That was always funny. And when you have someone in Australia who say, I really like your label, it's cool. You know, you're like in the other side of the world and they like your music. I think that's the best thing for me, you know.
Alex, any particular moment that you remember?
I have a lot of remember. We can stay here during 1 hour if you want. But no, see, there is this, not to remember, but other thing of our life is connected with music, and we love sharing together. Even Michel spoke about Vitalik. We spoke about Kiko, Carreta, Miss Keating, Terence Fixmer. All the French band are still connected, and we are still friends. And we meet. We love meeting each other. And the remember is that we are a lot of friends and with the same passion, and that is what I remember of these 20 years.
Well, I'd like to thank Michel and Alex, the happy family of good life with its quiet little smiles there. Thank you very much. And Zone. Thank you. And saving up his jet lag to be last today. Thank you. This is Jonathan Galkin from DFA Records, who flew in from New York this morning and is on fire, I can tell.
Yeah.
How was that espresso?
It was, I wanted another.
We need that on, I think. Check. Okay. So, Jonathan.
Yeah.
Lovely to have you here.
Thanks.
Were you always a music fan?
I used to be a music fan, yeah.
But now you're not.
No, I'm not anymore. Yeah, it sucked out. But no, I would, yes, always. My father is a drummer from the age of 4 years old. I started playing drums. Went to my first stadium concert at the age of 5. Sean Cassidy.
Good to know.
Top that. And you know Sean Cassidy is. You don't know who he is? David Cassidy's brother.
Please tell us more about Sean Cassidy.
No,
your passion for Sean Cassidy.
I could go on about Sean Cassidy, but it was, you know, it's the 70s. People were weird, but we from that age learned to play drums from my father, and it was really became an obsession at that young of an age. Started buying vinyl at the age of 5. They were Sean Cassidy records, but still, my dad as well bought a lot of vinyl, so I had, you know, strange-looking records. He could teach a university course on jazz. He's a jazz freak, but really into rock and country as well. So strange records sort of peering out from his console that I would sneak up to my room. You know, Grateful Dead, Europe '72 with all the cartoon characters on, you know, things like that, Rolling Stones and things. And that was when I was a little boy.
But you didn't initially start out working with music, did you? I think you went and studied film at NYU.
I went to college at NYU and I started in the acting program actually, and quickly realized I was out of my element there, and I didn't have the same passion as a lot of the thespians at NYU, and I really couldn't keep a straight face during a lot of the acting exercises, and I thought I'm not going to do this. And so I transferred to another program within NYU, which let you intern. A lot of it was, it's a very liberal program at NYU, but a lot of the credits you could earn was by sort of interning life experience at the variety of companies that were in New York. And I did study film at NYU as well, and screenwriting and producing film. And then I did year-long internships at a lot of major record labels. When there was a Polydor, I entered a Polydor, and A&M Records, and then Rolling Stone magazine, and these, you know, it's just kind of did the rounds for like 3 or 4 years. But those were very helpful because you learn, you get in the door, so you get to see more what you don't want to do than what you do want to do, or when you ever might get a chance to do it, what you would not do. Do you know what I mean? Like, oh, Polydor looks like IBM. Like, this is terrifying. Like, everyone's in a cubicle and there's literally, you know, there's no vibe. It was just kind of dead air, and people were not hyper intelligent. It was just like, it was an eye-opener. And I was 17 or 18, 19 at college and seeing this, so that was invaluable.
But even after that, you didn't move into the music. You moved into corporate entertainment, I believe,
yeah,
which I assume doesn't mean singing.
No, no. But it was music related, and it taught me. It was corporate. It was an era. It still exists, but it was the '90s now, and there was a lot of money in New York and new internet money, and a lot of banks. They were doing these corporate events where they hire, you know, big acts. I don't know, I'm trying to think of the acts we would work with, but say it's Sheryl Crow, you know, and they want investment bank wants to hold a dinner for 500 people in, you know, Hawaii, and they're going to bring Sheryl Crow and her band and pay her $500,000 to perform after dinner for 500 bankers and their wives who are at a resort. And during the day they go to conferences, and at night they're entertained by, you know, Robin Williams doing stand-up comedy or Sheryl Crow doing music. That was my job. I was a talent buyer. So we would strike deals with artists and talent agencies. So, you know, I was working with William Morris Agency and CAA and these people, but doing stuff that was very, there wasn't really you kind of made it up as you went along. You're just flinging corporate money at people, bribing them to do these events that no one ever saw or heard about. They weren't publicized. They were behind closed doors.
So what saved you and got you out of corporate entertainment and into the music
Well, it was
industry?
a great gig, honestly. Like, it was the first job. It was the only job I ever had before DFA. It was the first job I had when I got out of NYU. And it went from a company that was owned by 2 guys, and I was the first person they hired full-time. And when I left, there were, you know, 15 people working there. I was there for 8 years, but it really grew. And I mean, by the end, you know, we were doing Microsoft gigantic, you know, Conan O'Brien hosting and Santana playing, and ridiculous. I mean, it was amazing to see the money, the checks cut and the private planes booked, and for you know, a corporate presentation and to entertain people. But after 8 years, what changed was I met James. That's really what changed. I mean, I was in pursuit of something that I could feel changing in New York, because I was very still, you know, I was young, I was single, I was still actually going out in pursuit of something that I felt, I was kind of in search of something. I definitely explored New York nightlife in the 90s. Everything from one end of the spectrum, like sort of Limelight, Twilo, which is like obviously a very different dance culture than what DFA is. And it wasn't my scene, but I wanted to see what it was about. I didn't like it, and I didn't like the music, and that's what always puzzled me was, you didn't go home thinking, I gotta go get that, whatever was playing last night at the Limelight. It just wasn't my thing. But then you'd go to like Body and Soul, where they'd have Carrie Chandler, you know, it's basically the guy's name that did all those Body and Soul parties. But that was like another part of New York. And what happened right when, this was like 1999, 2000, was, I know you have your own stories about Vice, but Vice came to New York, and it wasn't them as like a sort of the cultural force that they are now. It was a stapled magazine, and it just had it captured a sort of, I don't know, they just kind of captured this sentiment of my generation that I hadn't really read before. there's definitely the sense of humor and the irreverence of it was enlightening to me, and I became. It was great to know that there was a new issue coming, and they had a little store in downtown New York, and checking in every day to see if the new issue arrived, like it was a comic book. You know what I mean? Like, which that doesn't even really exist anymore, and that was very exciting. And I mean that wasn't it, but that was something that I felt changed culturally. There's a new, like, sort of a new youth coming into New York, and it was really opening the door once I met James, and we can talk about that story, but like that door when I heard James and the people, Marcus, who owned Plant Bar, Marcus Lampkin, who is shit robot, and Plant Bar was the place where we threw a lot of the that was sort of a nightly party there. That was like sort of the door that I finally opened, where I was just like, that's the sound that I was looking for, where somebody contextualized all the different music into one set, basically. I was like, that's it. And then when I went in there, I realized that's the end of Vice, and this is where it all. So I felt like I was in search of something, and then when I met James, I was like, that's what I was looking for.
But did you initially, when you met James, how long did it take you to decide that you were going to start a record label together?
Well, he had already recorded with Tim Goldsworthy. They had met The Rapture, and they recorded House of Jealous Lovers. So James and I met at a bar called Passerby, which was attached to an amazing art gallery called Gavin Brown Gallery. And hold on, for me, wow. Is that Uzo? Oh, it's espresso. Whatever. Wow, thank you. I love France. What's that? That really is. Maybe I should pick it up. Is that him? You're talking a little slow. I met James at this bar. He'd already made House of Jealous Lovers, and that track really was like one of those things where I was like, that's that thing that I was hearing, almost like hearing in your head. Like, how do you do it? Like, it's hard to explain. But when I saw him DJ that same night at Plant Bar, and he was playing album tracks that David Bowie, making a disco set out of David Bowie songs and Can and The Police and things like that, mixed with old disco, and I was like, that's my record. That's my record collection. And I'd never heard someone do that before. Not that no one had ever done that before, obviously, but amongst our demographic, and at that time it was completely novel, because we were competing against, the other half was Twilo and the super clubs of New York, which don't really exist anymore. Sound Factory.
If you fast forward 5 years, you were basically defining the sound of New York by that point. I mean, how the hell did that happen, and how did it happen so fast?
Well, I mean, House of Jealous Lovers, like, in a way, like, they had already secretly defined a sound of, like, New York before the label even started, because the track was in its present state. Like, that was exactly the version, except for maybe one more mix that is out now. That night when I met him, and we had mutual friends in common that I went to NYU with, who helped James build the studio that became the DFA Studios and where our offices are. The track was done, and so that when I heard it, I was like, that is the sound, and he agreed. But they were keeping this track to themselves for months, and thought maybe they were just taking crazy pills, and it was just actually a terrible idea. And the guy, he can't really sing, and it's going to drive people crazy, and maybe we should just forget about it and record something else. And the band were coming from a different place too. They were coming from a very indie rock fan base, indie rock background, which James was as well, and they were trying to break through, sort of, latch onto it, create something different out of that. They were bored with indie rock.
The label had a very distinct aesthetic, though, I think, quite early on. Was that something that you had consciously sought to curate, or was it something that just happened almost by accident?
The aesthetic, it wasn't by accident. it was a lot of, it was sort of like big dumb ideas that, like make the center labels one color. And that came from going into certain dance shops in New York where we wanted our 12 inches to be. We knew it was going to be very hard when we made vinyl to get them into these shops because everything was so segregated. When you went to Sonic Groove in New York, it was straight up tech, it was Adam X's store, and every 12-inch on the wall was black and gray, and it all kind of looked alike. And we were like, how the fuck are we going to stand out from that? Like, well, that one's orange, and that one's green, and that one's royal blue. And then, it was like a year later when we had 6 singles out, and they were all up on the wall, and I was like, holy shit, it worked, because you could spot them a mile away. So that, those were like really just broad stroke decisions. The aesthetic of like handwriting and graph paper and those kinds of things, I swear came from finding the cheapest office supply store, making like self-inking stamps that cost $10 each, and stamping something that is like 12-point font, high res, blowing it up to, and really just ridiculous decisions made out of boredom that just became our aesthetic. We didn't have meetings where we sat with a sort of Peter Saville type and went over the Pantones of the label and things like that. The logo, James drew that on a piece of notebook paper, and it was just cut out in scans and never changed a stitch. That was it. It was just a scribble.
But you very much take the role of you take care of the business side whilst James takes care of the more creative aspects, or do you share these things? Or do you do the creative and the business sides, and he just makes a record now and then when he can be bothered to get out of bed?
He does get out of bed. And, it's changed a lot over the years. It used to be a lot of mostly, decisions made by myself and James and Tim. But I was upstairs in the office, and we never had, that role where we had a person who was only in charge of the paperwork or the books or the legal. It was always me, and it makes it very difficult. James never had that role. He was the guy downstairs. He had a strong opinion about a lot of the music that we were signing, and but as LCD, by accident, almost became the flagship band of the label, which started out as the Rapture until they wanted to go to Universal, and we did the deal with Universal, and off they went. And then, next up was, James put out Losing My Edge, and sort of the rest was history after that. So that became harder and harder to have his time, to have his focus, and it just fell on me. I wasn't mad at that, because it's what I love to do. I love the A&R part, I love the nurturing part, I love working with the artists. I'm terrible at the business part. But that's just, I'm not a math guy. I don't like, staring at P&Ls for a week at a time. Those are the weeks that I dread. I wake up with, whether they're good or bad, I want to spend my days listening to demos, listening to new mixes, being with the bands. I'm still the guy that will take the band, pick them up in my car at the airport, or take them shopping to buy a new synthesizer and sit with them, and indulge them when they want to talk about, the dreams and the plans, and get them excited. Otherwise, there would be, James doesn't really have time now. He's doing so many different things post LCD. Though he's coming back around, Mr. Murphy. I think he's starting to feel a little left out.
Good to hear. I was going to ask one more question of you before I see if there's anybody else who would like to ask anything. But you've obviously just inked a new deal, I believe, with Kenny. for DFA to be going through cooperative music. Is it still called cooperative music?
Yeah.
PS cooperative. And
we've been working with Co-op for probably 4 or 5 years now as an overseas distributor.
And do you see this as I get the feeling that DFA has been a little bit quiet on anything apart from 12-inch releases and I think a couple of albums recently.
Mm-hmm.
Is there about to be a big new relaunch of the label, or is this a kind of critical point in the company's history?
I mean, I just feel like every point is a critical point, only because running a record label is such a tight wire act that any album, any year could be the one that either escalates us into something I never saw coming or completely sinks us into like a point of despair. You know, one thing that's come with age is we actually have a back catalog. It's nice to have things that just sell and make steady money to count on, which wasn't always there. And we also have a logo now that is not, we've always had a logo, but suddenly, t-shirt sales and different we commission a lot of different artists to design t-shirts with our logo, and it pays, that's royalty free. Selling a t-shirt, that's money for us, and that pays for signing a new band too. So those were almost like unexpected bonuses as the record sales went down. And as Good Life was explaining about vinyl sales, House of Jealous Lovers, we sold, House of Jealous Lovers was the first thing we ever put out. So we hit the ground running. It sold over 25,000 copies on vinyl, which at the time was a big deal. That was a big deal for us. I mean, we just stopped, we couldn't keep it in print. It never happened again for us. Not even Losing My Edge came close to selling that many copies. But it's one of those things where you're like, holy shit, Losing My Edge maybe sold 15, and then we watch, and it goes to 5, and then it goes to 3, and now it's it's like they were saying, now it's like, we're gonna press 1,000. Yeah. And maybe we'll press another 500 if that sells out. But a real, vinyl is tough, but the vinyl LPs keep selling. The albums keep selling. The 12 inches, it's, the piracy has definitely taken its toll. When House of Jealous Lovers came out, there was only Napster. Yeah. And it wasn't available digitally. So you had to buy the record to hear it. We'll figure that.
Well, on that entirely cheerful note, John.
No, sorry. I don't know, but these are good times. We do have, this is a good time. Honestly, this is not like me, pissing on the industry or history or heritage. It's, I'm excited. It was a quiet year. Not quiet, but we didn't put out a ton of full-length albums in the past 12 months. But in true fashion, now we have 6 albums all waiting for their, I feel like it's like an airport. And you're next one's out, ready for takeoff, and they're all jockeying to get into that. Everyone wants their album out in September. Let's just put it that way. You know that drill, right? September. It's like, how's January?
Well, the best of luck to that. Jonathan Galkin from DFA Records. Yeah, do you want to do that? If anybody would like to ask a question, Stefan here will be the host.
Thanks a lot. That was really, really interesting anyway. Great stories and a lot of enthusiasm. What I want to know is what you just said about vinyl. I have a couple of questions, if that's okay. Vinyl, I mean, how do you not do any vinyl anymore? Or, I mean, you guys don't do vinyl anymore, but do you sell vinyl at PS at all? Or, I mean, in what proportion do you sell vinyl? And does it now play another role maybe in terms of an image for the label? I mean, what is the importance of vinyl today?
Well, vinyl is actually growing. There's 2 considerations. As a techno label, vinyl kept techno music alive through the 90s and even the years 2000. I remember the first Tiga 12-inch I released. pleasure from the bass. I think we sold 60,000 12 inches. That's gone down. For dance music, it's disappeared. But for indie music and rock music, it's actually on the high again, and things like Record Store Day really make a difference. And actually there's a FNAC in Bordeaux who actually told us last week that they believe that by the end of this year or beginning of 2014, they'll be selling more vinyl than CDs in their stores. So it definitely is growing because music lovers have rediscovered the sound and the emotion of vinyl, but for albums, not for 12 inches, so it's two different stories. And then, you know, you can sell a CD for, it goes for 10 euros in a store, whereas a vinyl, people will happily, for that extra quality, pay 20, 25 euros. So in terms of, you don't have the mass selling, but in terms of if it keeps on growing, it could be actually an interesting revenue stream for our labels and for ourselves in the coming years, if that pattern carries on.
Yes, in fact, it's true. It's really true what Kenny said for the rock band, the vinyl. For example, in Paris, I checked 2 weeks ago. There is I think 2 or 3 record shop with now opening in Paris dedicated to vinyl, and especially for Zone. Now we produced 12 issue. Yeah. How many issue? No. How many issue releases? 12 releases. But we're still thinking about the vinyl and making copy. I think next year. But for as you say, for the image and to have an object for the people who want to have a vinyl.
Okay, thanks. And the second question is like, I'm sorry, did you want to say something?
I mean, I was just going to say that with a major problem for us is that there's not the retail stores to sell them at anymore. They're gone. And where I used to be able to walk out my door in the village and go record shopping, there's nowhere in downtown New York. I used to go to Carmine Street where they'd have Vinyl Mania and Sonic Groove and Rocket Scientist, and that was just, you know, one stretch. And then you'd go to Bleecker Street and there'd be 3 record stores there, and then you could go to Virgin Megastore if you wanted. Like, every level is gone. So for us to sell vinyl, where we press a lot of our vinyl in the UK, and we're doing runs of 500 to 1,000, and hoping to get rid of them and not repressing. Whereas before, our goal, you know, this very lofty goal at the beginning, which seemed feasible, was everything stays in print, everything. So if it sells out, repress it. But now it's like, when you get rid of it, throw a party, and it just remains digital. And a lot of kids, just consumers, they just want to getting the digital is enough. It's like instant gratification. Now, if I want to buy a dance 12 half the time, I'm ordering it from Juno and waiting 2 weeks to get it, that's just life, because most of the titles you can't even get in the city. And so if you can't get it in New York, you know, like, that's a good, Rough Trade is coming to Brooklyn. You know, hurrah. But, which is cool, but, you know, that it's weird that, like, they're coming to Brooklyn and they're gonna almost be next to other music which I love to death. I don't know if everyone knows the store in New York, but when other music becomes basically one of the better dance shops in the city, something's definitely changed. It was never like that.
So yeah, if you're not selling a lot of vinyl, if you're selling more like downloads, what other sources of revenues have you to look to? I mean, you talked about merchandising, and you talked about like events. So is it like, I mean, what about the future? Would it be, I mean, what happens when streaming comes in, and what are your opinions on this sort of thing? I mean, are there other ways of generating revenue for a label nowadays, now that vinyl is like decreasing? Well, maybe not in all cases.
We almost treat vinyl as like a marketing. If you do a 12-inch, a lot of times it's a single offer. If it's a single offer record, it's almost a marketing budget. It's like budget 500 records to either give away or sell, and then you're done and you can write it off. With us, it's events for sure. There's corporate sponsorship. We've been doing a lot of stuff with Red Bull has basically taken over New York right now. We've been doing a lot of stuff with them. They've been very, very generous. And I'm not just saying financially, I just mean like marketing and promotion wise. Like I could never afford to do the amount of advertising that they've done with DFA across New York. Like it's almost embarrassing. Like they've covered the tubes, like the subway stations. There's billboards up. There's sniping all over the city with like giant posters with our logo on it. I'm walking to work and there we are. And that's never. I couldn't afford to do that. We've never done that historically, and I'm not mad at that. That's like it's a wonderful thing.
Streaming is growing.
Yeah. Streaming's picking up for us too.
It's 6 to 8% month-on-month increase.
Yeah.
And I love that because to me it replaces and it fights against piracy. And it's not that thing where it's people who think it's just too cheap, but it's really a good opportunity to get away with piracy. And when you see what happened in Sweden, there's the market's grown from 17% last year, and it really is the people, when they shut down the Pirate Bay, people converted into Spotify, and that's obvious, so that's good. Neighboring rights are growing, and in France, if you get a radio hit, you make some money, so it's not all negative. Actually, I'm very excited at the moment.
It's just different.
It's different, yeah. And I feel that the industry's gone through a tunnel and we're coming out of it. And les masques tombent. And the real guys, the people who are passionate, who stuck with their ethos and stuck to their guns during the hard times, will come out and will be making money again and being successful again and generating revenues, because there's less of us, hopefully better people who want to survive, have survived, and will do well. So, and it's changed. It was changing. Now I think the change is actually translating in something material for us as an industry. That's my spin on it.
Michel. No, it's okay.
One more question?
Bonjour, je vais poser la question en français en revanche. Tout à l'heure, on a entendu parler dans vos histoires à chacun, vos territoires un peu natals au niveau de vos labels, à savoir New York, Grenoble et Bruxelles. J'aimerais savoir, avec la globalisation, la démocratisation d'Internet, vous devez recevoir des démos venant du monde entier. Est-ce qu'il est encore possible d'avoir des scènes ou des sons marqués territorialement, qui ont une certaine empreinte territoriale? Tout à l'heure, on a entendu par exemple le son de New York, il y avait un moment le son de Détroit, le son de Paris, le son de Berlin maintenant, on entend beaucoup ça. Est-ce que c'est, selon vous, encore d'actualité?
Alors, je réponds en français. I do it in French or in English? Or... In English? Okay. I think now it's not so obvious that, about in terms of a city producing a typical sound. I think now everything is interconnected and influences are coming from everywhere. So it's not so. Sometimes you have an artist, he sounds like a Detroit artist, but he's from Japan or Italy or France or I don't know. So it's not so as it used to be. 20 years ago, yeah, you could tell. But I think now it's different.
I mean, maybe this is obvious, but it's different, I think, a lot just because of the accessibility of music, whereas before it was much harder to access that much different music from different territories, whereas now, with the web browser, you can basically sample a little bit of everything. And we quickly changed, we started out as a very New York thing and pretty quickly expanded, signing bands from other territories, other countries, other places. I don't know if that really answers the question, but the question was in French. I will respond in Yiddish.
Anybody else?
Thank you very much. In that case, I close the floor at this point and would like to thank Alex and Michel, the hacker, Jonathan and Kenny for joining us in what I hope was an informative and certainly very intellectual conversation. Thank you very much indeed for coming.